Hello, everybody. My name is Ethan Yost, and welcome back to a morning weather briefing. Today is January the 2nd, 2024, and it's pretty cool out there across Missouri early this Thursday morning, sitting mainly in those low 30s and upper 20s, basically uniform temperatures across the board in the state of Missouri. And this cool air mass is really going to set the stage for what is possibly going to be a pretty significant winter storm going into this weekend from late Saturday night into Monday morning. And so this is going to be a winter storm that is going to occur across the Midwest and central United States. We're going to dive into those details in this video, but cool air mass already in place across Missouri and also the whole central United States basically being shrouded by a polar air mass of 30s and 20-degree temperatures and even teens and single digits up to the northwest up in here, but cool air mass already in place, and that's setting the stage for a pretty dynamic upper level system to move through this region come Sunday time period. Ensemble guidance suggests a continued period of cooling into the weekend, besides this transient period of warming into Thursday into the mid 40s. The overall trend is to gradually decrease our temperatures over the next few days, however, and that's going to promote that cool air mass to stick with us and then that upper level dynamic system to act upon that. Current upper level pattern is pretty quiet besides this trough out to the east that was just in the United States over the last week. Overall, a pretty laminar upper level setup here, very expansive jet stream across the entire United States. There's a subtle kink in the flow ejecting across the Rockies back in here currently, and that's going to rotate through the flow and eject through portions of the central United States and possibly generate some light snowfall across the region, but nothing too impactful. Back to the west, there's an expansive ridge that's translating across the Pacific Northwest, and that's going to be a contributing factor to that cooling trend that we're going to see in the latter half of the week and moving into the weekend. Jumping into some model data and starting at 500 millibars again, we're going to be looking at some long range guidance and try to get a good idea of what this winter storm is going to look like and also some of the contributing factors to some uncertainty within this forecast. Again, over the next few days, we're expecting pretty laminar flow in the upper levels, not very dynamic by any means. And then by the time we get to the Friday time period, a very expansive ridge digs into the western side of the US, positioned somewhere across this region in here, the axis striking through the western side of the Rockies. But very, very strong northwesterly flow across much of the central United States, ushering that cool air mass into the region. Moving throughout time and going into the Friday evening time period, we see the sign of our next trough starting to eject through the Pacific Northwest, and that's a sign of our next system that's going to be promoting this winter storm to develop across the central United States come this weekend. Some caveats to this winter storm forecast is the actual progression of this trough and its associated surface low. This is going to be very key on determining where each precipitation type is going to occur. Small deviations in temperature across the entire vertical profile can contribute to different precipitation types. So moving the track of these features will differ the location of these air masses. As we go throughout time, this trough continues to amplify and become a pretty compact open wave ejecting through the Rockies come Saturday evening. And by this point, we would expect some semblance of leaf cyclogenesis on the lee side of the Rockies here across eastern Colorado into northeastern New Mexico. With time, this trough translates to the east-southeast, and it closes off and continues to amplify with time. And by the time we get to the Monday 0Z time frame, the main vorticity max is starting to translate across portions of the central United States, with strong flow relegated to the southeastern periphery of this trough. In the Sunday afternoon time frame, we notice very large-scale forcing for ascent in the exit region of this trough, with very well-defined defluence, or the spreading apart of those wind vectors. As such, height falls over time begin to overspread much of the central United States, contributing to surface pressure falls and large-scale rising motion as well. The belt of enhanced flow continues to eject and pivot through the central United States and into the Tennessee and Ohio River valleys come Monday morning, and that's going to expand into the mid-Atlantic by the time we get into the Monday afternoon and evening time period. Down at 850 millibars, we're going to be looking at our low-level jet, and this is a very good contributing factor on where those mesoscale bandings are going to occur within the snow squalls. And so we're going to be able to see exactly where the heaviest snowfall would likely occur based on this model output. And generally, it's at the leading edge or at the nose of the low-level jet. And so if we go throughout time into the Saturday and Sunday time period, we see that low-level cyclone does develop across that northeastern New Mexico, southeastern Colorado vicinity, and then the low-level wind field starts to increase just ahead of that cyclone, and we see that low-level jet starts to increase. And so right here at the leading edge or the nose of the low-level jet is where low-level convergence is favored and where the strongest forcing for ascent on a mesoscale. And so we would expect heavier and more enhanced snowfall rates or just precipitation in general, because we're likely going to see a mix of precipitation between sleet, freezing rain, and snow within much of this region. Going throughout time, that zone of convergence at the nose of that low-level jet continues to stay within much of the central Missouri corridor and then extending eastward into the Ohio River Valley come the late Sunday and early morning time period of Monday. But overall, a very strong low-level jet and a favored corridor of convergence right at the nose of that low-level jet. And we're likely going to see a pretty substantial corridor for pretty enhanced snowfall rates. Now, this corridor is likely going to evolve over the next couple days, considering we're still a few days out. But keep in mind across portions of Missouri that there is a favorable look for some pretty enhanced snowfall rates, given some other parameters that we got to look at. Going off to the eastern sector here, again, we see that low-level jet does amplify with time across portions of central Missouri. And then again, we also noted across the Ohio River Valley as well, a very defined zone of convergence at the nose of this low-level jet that's going to be a focus for more enhanced and heavier snowfall rates. And so, gonna have to see if those ingredients are going to align in that region for snowfall or just winter precipitation in general. But overall, the look for very strong focused convergence is looking to stretch from central Missouri eastward into the Ohio River Valley and definitely looking like a favored corridor for some pretty enhanced precipitation. Jumping down to the surface now and going throughout time, again, we're expecting that low-level cyclone to develop across portions of northeastern New Mexico and southeastern Colorado come the Saturday afternoon and evening time period. And here on the GFS, we see that surface low does develop here across that time period and again, it's expected to shift off to the east-southeast throughout the next few days. Going throughout time, the model does prog that this low-level cyclone does move off to the east and goes through portions of central Oklahoma and then going through portions of southern Missouri come the Sunday and Monday morning time period. After translating it across southern Missouri, it's going to continue across the portions of the Tennessee and Ohio River valleys, and so affecting much of those same regions that we were annotating at 850 millibars. Now, if we draw out the forecasted surface low track going from central Oklahoma through northern Arkansas and into the Ohio and Tennessee valleys here, again, conceptually speaking, wintry precipitation is favored on the north and western side of the track. And so, conceptually speaking, we would expect the wintry precipitation to be occurring on this side of the surface low. And so again, eyeing this corridor, going back in time to when the surface low is crossing this area, again, we see a gyre of sub-freezing temperatures here north of southern Missouri and into Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, Illinois eastward. And then south of that warm front that's stretching through southern Missouri, we see much warmer and a much more tropical air mass. Down to the south, we could see some severe weather risk and some thunderstorm activity and we might dive into those details a little bit later. But again, still focusing on that northern zone north of this warm front and north of that surface low track. And so this is going to be a favored corridor for that wintry precipitation. By the time we get to Sunday evening, that warm front is still stretching through portions of southern Missouri and into the Ohio River Valley. And so again, north of this warm front being that favored corridor for wintry precipitation, and so the long-term threat still being in that corridor. Going back to 850 millibars now and looking at the temperatures in this level, this is going to be a good indicator at the zones at which our precipitation is likely to differ. And the reason for looking at this level in particular is because normally we find little inversions or warm noses within this level. And those are usually the impetus to changing precipitation to either freezing rain, sleet, or other modes of precipitation. Looking for those subtle warm noses or corridors at which the temperature is above freezing is going to give us an idea of where there might be a little more uncertainty or where there might be mixed precipitation. And so going through Saturday and into Sunday, again, we noted that much of the sub-freezing temperatures at the surface extended well into southern Missouri. But notice at 850 millibars that those above freezing temperatures are extending into much of central Kansas, into west central Missouri, and down into southeast Missouri. And so overlapping surface temperatures that are sub-freezing, we could definitely see a mixed mode of precipitation in this region, and even possibly just to the north of this, because we definitely can't count this out shifting just to the north or south. And so freezing rain, sleet, definitely a favored precipitation type in this corridor from central Kansas eastward and into the Ohio River Valley. Those above freezing 850 millibar temperatures are again going straight through that central Missouri area and into the Ohio River Valley and down into the Tennessee Valley. And so, again, a favored corridor for some pretty enhanced freezing rain and also some sleet accumulation. I'm going to say this once again and probably a few times after this. This is likely going to change spatially as we get closer to the event because these smaller scale features are more resolved with the shorter range models, and it's still a few days out, so the GFS is likely not perfect on the exact location of this warm air mass at 850 millibars. And so likely the spatial extent of this mixed precipitation mode is going to be better resolved getting closer, but this is still giving us a good look on a more favored corridor. Now we're going to look at the GFS's output for precipitable water, just to look at how high quality our moisture is going to be in co-location with all of the other ingredients that we annotated. Going throughout Saturday and going into the Sunday timeframe, we see a reservoir of pretty high precipitable water values stretching through much of the central U.S. and the southern U.S., and much of the Kansas, Missouri, Illinois region comes Sunday morning, and then going to continue to expand northward into much of the Ohio and Tennessee valleys come Sunday afternoon into the evening hours and going through Monday morning. Seeing pretty high precipitable water values, a sign of very high quality moisture within a polar air mass, and so a sign of a pretty widespread winter storm possible. Something I want to point out is that along this warm front stretching across southern Missouri, there is a extreme temperature gradient from north to south. Again, sub-freezing temperatures to the north of this boundary, and then seeing 60s and 70s temperatures to the south of this boundary. And so that's really the main reason why we're seeing such a wide variety of precipitation types with this system. It's just that there's such differing air masses on each side of the baroclinic zones in association with that surface cyclone. This is promoting very differing temperature profiles on a very small scale, allowing for this mixed precipitation mode across a large swath of the central United States. Again, we are super far out, but the most favored corridor right now for the most enhanced snowfall rate is looking just north of that convergent zone at 850 millibars, or the nose of that low-level jet, and also just north of that warm front where we are seeing sub-freezing temperatures, high quality moisture, and adequate forcing for ascent in the mid to upper levels to initiate some semblance of wintry precipitation. So again, that most likely corridor for that winter precipitation looking to stretch from that central Kansas vicinity and southeastern Nebraska area, possibly up into that southern Iowa vicinity northward into the Ohio River Valley, and then going as far south as southern Missouri and possibly into northern Tennessee. So again, this is going to be an evolving air mass with time. It's going to spatially differ as we get closer to the event, but this regime on the western half looking like the most favorable area for wintry precipitation. at least the most significant. If we look at the total snowfall and the Kuchera ratio for the GFS, it is showing extreme numbers here. Now, I want you to take these numbers with a grain of salt because we are very far out, but it's pinpointing those same corridors north of that southern Missouri vicinity and going as far north as maybe central Iowa and then stretching eastward into the Ohio River Valley. We'll get to that eastern sector in a minute, but looking at this western sector, we are seeing values in excess of 20, 30 inches, especially in that corridor from north central Missouri eastward into east central Illinois. And so, very substantial winter storm in terms of snowfall rates, especially coming here from the GFS. Let's just look at another model here. We're going to look at the Euros output here. And it kind of has generally the same areas outlined. However, it's not quite as robust on how intense it wants the snowfall magnitudes. And so overall, still seeing a very strong signal for very widespread heavy snowfall across the central United States, mainly in that corridor in central Missouri and the northern half of central Missouri. But again, take these numbers with a grain of salt. Do not take these and post them on the internet. It is still a few days out, but it is giving us a good signal for a pretty robust winter storm across the central United States. Back to the GFS and looking in the eastern sector now. Again, we are seeing that corridor along the Ohio River Valley and north being a very favored corridor for snowfall in excess of 10, 15 inches. But again, take these numbers with a grain of salt. But again, giving us a good look overall of a pretty substantial winter storm. These numbers are likely to change getting closer. Looking at the Euro model and seeing how this differs in the eastern sector, again, seeing very much of the same areas being affected, and again, a favored corridor for some substantial snowfall rates. Now let's look at some of the outputs for the total freezing rain accumulation. And again, we noted that that corridor is likely going to be the most uncertain corridor, just given how all of the ingredients are kind of colliding in that area. But the most likely corridor right now is looking to be somewhere from central Missouri southward and expanding west and east from that vicinity. And so if we go throughout time and look at the GFS's output here, it does seem like just south of that central Missouri corridor and along the Ohio River Valley, seeing very substantial signal here for some very large-scale freezing rain activity. Over on the Euro model, we're expecting to see very much of the same, and that's exactly what we see, and even to a greater extent with north and south extent. Again, do not pay too much on the numbers here, but the overall trend here is a very intense winter storm across the central United States, occurring from late Saturday into Monday morning, mainly occurring from that Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa vicinity southeastward into Missouri, Illinois, and the Ohio River Valley vicinity. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and have a great day.